Is your screen is visible?
Can we start now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be presenting on the topic JList. You have
Chandana, wait.
Huh?
Present your PPT.
oh
Are you
sorry
she?
sorry
Yeah.
yeah okay yeah. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll be presenting on the topic JList. You have already learned about other basic Swing components like J scroll pane, J checkbox, etc. Let us learn a bit about JList today. What is JList? It is a part of Java Swing package. JList is a component that displays a set of objects and allows the user to select one or more items. JList inherits JComponent class. JList is an easy way to display an array of vectors. Although the list often consists of strings, it is possible to create a list of about any object that can be displayed.
So JList, as we know, is a class. Every class has its inbuilt constructors. In the same way, JList has four constructors. So the first one is JList. The constructor is called JList, and this constructor is the simplest one, which will just create an empty template of the list without any elements in it. The second one is JList list model data model. So here, this constructor gives you a JList that displays elements from the specified model. And the third one and the fourth one are the most important and most commonly used in all the programs. The third one is a JList constructor, which takes an array as a parameter. So what does this array contain? This array will contain all the elements which have to be displayed in your list or the list items. So the fourth one is called JList vector. It takes a vector as a parameter. Now, what is a vector? A vector is very similar to a dynamic array, but in case of a vector, the size is not fixed. So you, as and when you want, you can add in elements or delete elements, which means a vector can either have 0 elements or it can even have thousands of elements. So this last constructor will take a vector as a parameter and display the elements. Moving on.
The JList is based on two models, the list model and the list selection model. List model is used for the creation of the JList, and whenever there exists a list, the selection of items comes into picture, and thus the list selection model is used. Whenever we have a list, you can have any number of elements that can be stored in it. But to fit this list on a single frame and to make it easier for the user to go through the list, the JList is inscribed or wrapped into a JScroll pane. It makes a scrollable view of the list. So whenever we have a limited screen size, we can use a scroll pane to display large components whose size can change dynamically. There are two other attributes we use in JList program, list selection event and list selection listener. List selection event, the change occurred in the list, which may be selection or deselection of an element, is called the list selection event. List selection listener. Whenever we have a list, there is selection and deselection. These are called the events. The program will have to give a particular output corresponding to the element selected by the user from this list. But how does the program get to know that the change has occurred? This is done by the list selection listener, which captures the change, which is either deselection or selection, done by the user and notifies this to the program. When the user selects any item in the list, it can be done in either of the three ways based on the requirement. These three ways are single selection, single interval selection, and multiple interval selection. We'll be elaborating more on this later on.
So now we move on to the inbuilt functions that JList class has. The first one is add list selection listener. So we already saw what a list selection listener is. So the function of a list selection listener is to capture the change which has occurred in the selection made by the user and notify it to the program saying you give this output because the user has selected this. So a list selection listener is present, but add, as the name suggests, add will add this component into your program. The next function is get selected index. So in a list, of course, the only two functions will be either selection or deselection. So when a selection occurs, of course, the basic output will be which is the element selected. So get selected index will give you the index of the element, which means it will return an integer value. The next one is get selected value. So what the previous one does will give the index of the element selected, but get selected value will give the value itself, which may be either the string or the character or an integer, whichever the user selects, the value will be returned. The next one is set selected index, and if you see, it takes an integer as a parameter. So as the name suggests, sometimes in a list, suppose you have a condition wherein 90% of the users end up selecting the same choice or option. So the programmer may decide that let me highlight this option, and so that the user doesn't have to make any selections further. The other 5 or 10% who want a change in the selection, they can either select different options, but a default value will be highlighted as the selected one. So that is what set selected index will do. Set selection mode, in the bracket you have list selection model dot mode type. Now selection mode is based on different circumstances or different requirements. You can either select a single element or multiple elements. So in place of mode type, if you put single selection, that means the user will be able to select only one element from the list. You also have single interval and multiple interval selection, which is for selecting multiple elements. So the programmer will have a choice as to how the user should select, either it's a single element or multiple elements. The last one is set visible row count. This takes an integer parameter. Now, visible row count is a list may have less than 10 elements, or it can even have 100 elements. We can't say. So if you have many number of elements, it is hard to display everything at once on the frame or the screen. So set visible row count will define what are the number of elements to be displayed at any instant of time. If I have 20 elements and my integer parameter is 4, so 4 elements will be displayed at once, and you will inscribe it. You will inscribe it in the JScroll pane. So as you scroll down, rest of the elements will be visible. Moving on, we'll be elaborating on selection modes, and this is a pictorial representation of that. According to the requirement, if you have a single item to be selected, you will use single selection mode. If you have multiple items which has to be selected, you have two options, either single interval selection or multiple interval selection.
With single selection, the user can select only a single item at any interval of time. Let us take an example of Facebook account creation. When we want to create an account, we need to fill certain details about ourselves, such as date of birth or gender, and etc. And during the selection of date of birth or gender, we are only allowed to make one selection at a time. We can select the date as any one number or any one month or year. We cannot select multiple dates or months at a time. Because if we were to select multiple days, years, or months, it would not make any sense, right? Similarly, while selecting the gender, we select either male or female. This is where single selection comes in use, which lets the user select only one item in the list. Some common examples of single selection, which we see in our everyday use, is selection of font style. When we create a project on Word or PowerPoint, you can select only one font style at a time whenever you want to change your fonts. And again, while selecting your gender in filling forms and choosing the birth type or destination while booking air flight or train tickets.
The next one is a single interval selection. So if you look at the definition, it says the user can select from one range of items. Now, what is range? Range is nothing but a topic. So here we have given an illustration of the Zomato app. Here, if you see cuisines, that becomes a single range. So from a single range of items, you will be allowed to select multiple options. You can select North Indian, Chinese, fast food, and many more, and say apply, which means from a single topic, multiple elements can be selected. So this is what single interval selection does. Moving on.
Multiple interval selection. This is also known as the default mode of selection, which lets the user select multiple ranges or topics of items within a list. Here we are taking a shopping app as an example. Just assume that you want to shop few clothes for yourself and you have few options in your mind, so you open your shopping app and then you go to either men or women's section and then you filter out the options you want to search for. In the filter option, you have different categories of clothes to select from, different colors to choose from, and of course, different sizes too. These categories, colors, sizes, etc. are your different ranges or topics. And among these ranges, you can select multiple items like what kind or category of clothes you want. Example, shirts, sweaters, or maybe pants even. Or maybe you want to see multiple color options too. All this can be done by simply using the multiple selection mode, which lets you select multiple items from different ranges at a time. As you can see in the example, here we are choosing different sizes, and then when we click apply, those options will be visible to you.
So we have the illustration of a JList program here. Would be explaining the program. The first one is an import statement. So basically, this program has a very simple structure. We have import statements, we have a class, and in that we have the void main with the different statements. The first one is an import statement. So we are importing the flow layout class from the AWT or Abstract Window Toolkit package. The next statement, we are importing the swing package. So we have named our class JList, and here we have the static void main. The first statement is the creation of the object of a JFrame class. So the object is named frame, and here it has the parameter JList. So JList is basically the heading which you want your frame to have, or the title of the frame. The next one is an array called selections, which is of type string. So this array, as you see, has 4 colors, which is green, red, orange, and dark blue. The next statement is creation of an object of the JList class, which is called list. And the parameter we give here is selections. So as we saw in our constructors, this is the third type of constructor where we pass an array as a parameter to the constructor. So the next statement is set selected index 1. So set selected index will highlight a default element in the list as a selected value. So here 1 means that red is going to be highlighted in our output, which we will be seeing. The next one is add JScroll pane, and the parameter we give is list. So add will add that component into your container or frame. So we want the JScroll pane to be added into our frame, and the JScroll pane should contain the list. That is what this means. The next statement is that we are setting a size for our frame, which is the X and Y values, 300 and 400. Set layout, new flow layout. So what flow layout does is that when you have different elements to be displayed on your screen, either one next to the other or one below the other, that is done by the new flow layout. So it will display your elements in an orderly manner with equal spacing. The next one is set default close operation. So this one will close your frame when you click on the X or the red close button. The last one is frame.set visible true. So whatever statements we have written, whatever we do, by default, the visibility of the frame is invisible. You can't see the frame unless you set the visibility to true. So this is all about the program. Can we see the output? Yeah. So here, if you see, we have given two outputs. First one is the default output. As I said, set selected index will select or highlight the red as the default selected value. And after the user makes his own different choice, that will be the user controlled output, where the user here has selected dark blue. So we have typed the program on Eclipse. Let's see the illustration.
As you can see, the frame name here is JList because we had passed the parameter to JFrame class as JList, and the default list item selected or highlighted here is red because the set selected index was given the parameter 1. And now when the user selects an item, that item gets highlighted in the list. And only one item can be selected at a time because it's a single selection program. Let us try and make few changes in our program and see what happens. Let me try adding a few colors in our list. Maybe yellow and pink. And set our selected index to 3. Let's run it. Now, as you can see, 2 more items have been added to our list, and the default highlighted item is now dark blue because we set the selected index as 3. So dark blue is at index 3, so that is being highlighted. And again, when the user selects any item in the list, that respective item is getting highlighted. So summing it all up, we got to know that JList class in Java is suitable for displaying object data in a list, and it can be used to activate events on the basis of selection of particular value in the list. JList can also be used to represent data in a very orderly manner in Java applications. Thank you.